You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Ashley Hardgrave, joined this week by Oliver Camacho. All right, this week we go inside the huddle with Joshua Winograde, one of opera's leading administrators and now director of opera studies at Rice's Shepherd School of Music. Is this the interview that finally lands the OBS team a tenure track position in Opera Bantering? Plus, in the 2-minute drill, sweating employment at the Kennedy Center, sweating a conductor at Caserta, and straight up sweating and fainting in Verona. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. You're going to click follow. On Apple Podcasts, you're going to hit that plus sign. You can also email us your hot takes by writing to, get your pencils out, mailbag at operaboxscore.com, or you can upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you will get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan, a foam finger, just for sharing your own hot take. It's a very interesting vintage variety of OBS this week. It's the OCAH double hitter. Oliver, there's been a lot of tennis. How you doing, babe?
I'm trying to catch up on sleep because I have been getting up early to watch Wimbledon. Very sad finale to what has been a really exciting 2 weeks of tennis. The two final matches just did not have like the emotional satisfaction for the audience. One was a complete blowout. American Amanda Anisimova double bageled against Iga Swiatek. Wow. And congratulations to Iga Swiatek for winning her first Wimbledon. We knew she had it in her. Has not really been her surface, but this time she came through and she just demolished Amanda Anisimova, which was hard for the audience. I think like you want to see them, win at least one game, So it sort of took the sort of joy out of that final. And then Carlos Alcaraz just did not raise his level enough to beat Jannik Sinner. And I've always thought of Jannik Sinner as the better player because he's just more consistent. But Carlos Alcaraz's highs are higher than Jannik, but his lows are way lower than Jannik's baseline. So it really is a matter of, will Carlos play his best? And that sort of reminds me of Serena Williams in a way. They're very different players, but Serena Williams was like that too. It's like, it's always feels like it depends on how she plays today. If she's feeling it, she will win. She'll beat anybody, Yeah.
It's funny. In Chicago, we have a beleaguered NFL team, the Bears, and we had a similar thing in our quarterback for many years, Jay Cutler. When Jay Cutler's arm was on, he was unstoppable and he was incredible. And there's a reason they paid him a lot of money, but his arm became less and less reliable. Like if he was on, he was on. And if he wasn't, it was a total disaster. And it's one of the reasons that made me frustrated with him. But at the same time, when it is on and when it all works, man, it's totally fire. Speaking of fire, quick little sports. We're kind of in the dog days of summer and the dog days of actual sports to follow now that tennis is over and now that all these other things are over. But one thing that's still going on is the WNBA. And speaking of Chicago teams, our beloved WNBA team, the Chicago Sky, who's been sitting at more losses than wins, took down the Minnesota Lynx, who are one of the best teams in the league, sitting at 18-4. They are playing again, I think, right now, but that was the game they had over the weekend. Congrats to the Sky. Also in WNBA, folks, if you are not familiar with the mascot for the New York Liberty, Big Ellie, the elephant, I encourage you to get this joy into your life. She has a beautiful big braid that she flings around. She does praise breaks where she plays gospel music with her dancers and plays Kirk Carr music, Kirk Franklin music. If you're on the TikToks, if you do a talk, go ahead and search for Ellie the Elephant. You will not be disappointed. Meanwhile, let's not disappoint ourselves. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
2 weeks ago, we interviewed Anthony Leone from Opera Theater of St. Louis, and he said the name of Josh Winograde. And just maybe a week later or a couple of weeks later, Rice's Shepherd School of Music reached out to me to see if I wanted to interview Joshua Winograde. So, of course, I said yes. I love when things come together like that, very, metaphysically, like it just happened like so naturally. And it was obvious that I was meant to talk to him. As the new head of opera at the Shepherd School of Music, we might have to reconsider the next time we do a bracket on conservatory programs and give extra weight to Rice now that Josh is there. Because if you need to sing for somebody in the US and you want to get the jobs, just sing for him, apparently. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Joshua Winograde. Joshua, is it okay if I call you Josh?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, well, if you're a gay of a certain generation, you will remember Josh's proposal to his husband, now husband, on Project Runway. I don't remember what season that was, like 2013 or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
That was the first encounter I had with you. I was like, oh, that guy works in opera and like his whole family is like going to be creative, you know? And then once I knew your name, I started to see your name as it relates to our business all the time. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to speak with you. It's my understanding that you started off as a singer.
I did. I went to school to Juilliard for my undergrad and grad school, and then began a career as a professional opera singer. It started in the Young Artist program at Houston Grand Opera, and then just went on the road, you know, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
But not so wonderful that you stayed.
True. That's true. It was wonderful in a way that I'll qualify because it's probably an important distinction. It fostered my, eternal love for opera and for singers. Being on stage at that high level with international casts at Houston Grand Opera, being amongst these incredibly talented students at Juilliard, made me really, really, really deeply fall in love with the artists as the kind of first and foremost reason that all of us love the art form. It's the singers, I believe, personally.
I totally agree with you. And I think people who know my story well know that like I love singers so much and I love their neuroses and I know how to deal with them and I know what they need.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm still singing every now and then, even though if I had made a decision like you early on to just, okay, that I'm not doing that so great, let me start doing this. Maybe I would have gotten further in my administrative career, but alas, here we are.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I really fell, so in love with the whole kind of mindset of somebody who is so compelled to say something through their voice and through singing that they, feel like it's worth all of the, I always think that every job or every kind of experience has like, a size of giant rocks that are thrown at you. And if you're aerodynamic, you glide right through them and as if it was nothing. And if you're the wrong shape, every single rock hits you and really hurts. And so I remember looking around and saying, gosh, all of my colleagues are just so perfectly shaped for this business. And I am just being slammed by these meteors as I go through. Every time I woke up and forgot what city I was in because it was, a Tuesday, this must be Belgium or whatever. It felt like some sort of existential crisis of like, where am I? Where's my home? Where's my husband? Where's all this stuff? And I looked around and I had these colleagues that were just so compelling as artists and loved it so much. And I loved them so much. And I realized, I could probably do something better with my life that would help support those people and not myself have to be one of them.
Well, I tell a version of this story all the time, but I know a singer who got broken because they couldn't figure out how to use the washing machine in the country they were in. It's like that was the last straw. Right.
And I remember, my manager at the time, Janice Mayer, called with a really, really remarkable opportunity to go for 4 months to sing Shalkalov and Boris Godunov with the Rice Opera in the Netherlands. And it was, the kind of thing that was, really every young singer's dream at the time to get an opportunity to spend a significant, chunk of time with income in Europe, kind of right after embarking on a professional career. And I remember my response to that invitation was just like absolute dread and terror and I thought, wait, this is an opportunity that I know people who, would gladly push me down a flight of stairs for this contract I was just offered. If I'm if I'm approaching this engagement with terror, then I should probably consider what else would fulfill me in the same.
Yeah, let somebody else have it.
Yeah.
Well, we need to fast forward to sort of your roles at LA Opera, where you spent many years. Can we summarize like where you began and where you ended up at LA?
So I had a colleague named Nino Sanikidze, who's still one of my closest colleagues in the industry. She and I, pianist and coach, and we had worked together as singer coach. And so she knew that I was interested in effecting a transition from the stage to the dark side, as Kim Whitman from Wolf Trap taught me to call it. And Nino had just gotten a job at LA Opera and said, they're looking for someone to come and help kind of set up a new young artist program and run it. And you have experience with that. You went through a young artist program. You already set one up for Wolf Trap, which was the Wolf Trap Opera Studio that I created. And she said, would you want me to throw your name into the ring? And I said, yes. So I got the job, thankfully. And that was a kind of homecoming for me because I'm from Los Angeles, but getting the job at LA Opera was unrelated to that. But it is the company I grew up seeing as a kid, falling in love with opera. That was my home company. So when I was invited to come back and help create and run the new young artist program there for Placido Domingo, I jumped at the opportunity. And about 6 months in, I realized it's all I wanted to do. And I quit singing fully. I canceled all my remaining engagements and focused on that. Shortly after creating that young artist program at LA Opera, Greg Henkel, who was the casting director, left LA to go to San Francisco Opera, and LA Opera invited me to become the casting director of LA Opera. And then within a few years of that, they said, would you be interested in also going back to run the young artist program and doing a kind of, two-pronged approach to our artistic programs? And I loved that idea so much because I always thought, if you want to train young singers, you have to get them on stage. And so now I was the person kind of responsible for both of those things. So I could train the young singers and cast them with no, no hurdles to getting there. So, and that came with LA Opera and Placido Domingo's full support. So,
so you became one of the most important people that somebody had to sing for.
Well, I had jobs to offer to young singers interested in a young artist program opportunity, and I had jobs to offer singers who wanted main stage casting. So I loved it because it gave me exposure to the full spectrum of artists, from students, about approaching the end of their kind of academic tenure, people graduating from what they thought would probably be their final degree, whether that was undergrads or master's students. And then, of course, I was traveling all through Europe every summer, auditioning singers who wanted main stage roles at LA Opera. And it was, just a dream opportunity to be able to do both of those things. So that's how my job at LA Opera morphed over the, let's say, 16 years that I was there. And I want to mention that at the beginning of my story, I mentioned Nino Sanikidze, the pianist. She was, my right hand through all of that for the entire time. So I always say that if anyone wants to give me any credit for any job I've ever done right, it's because I was partnered with Nino Sanikidze in that effort.
So be nice to your coaches, people. Yeah. So last week we spoke to Anthony Leon, and, I told the story already on the podcast that I heard his operalia via video, and I was just following him and just saying, okay, that's a really beautiful voice. But it wasn't until I was in the room with him and I heard him sing, I was like, oh, I get it now. It's sweet and it carries beautifully in the house.
And he opens his mouth and you just immediately feel it, as an audience member, you feel at tremendous ease. You feel like you are being taken down a road by someone who is kind of masterful at their craft. And I want to tell you something. His audition for LA Opera, I was in the theater of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. So it was me and then 3,100 other empty seats. And Anthony Leon was on stage. And I remember, that having that experience at that moment, he opened his mouth and I just thought, I could listen to him sing the phone book at me all day long.
Well, he is a very unusual case, and we'll talk about that in a second. But can you talk about this experience of hearing singers early in the development and trying to suss out what is great? I mean, I think of those master winemakers who like have to taste grapes, off the field. It's like, okay, this one is ready, and like the wine tastes like crap, like, when it's first, fermented, but you have to know that, okay, in 8 years, that's going to be amazing,
Yeah. So, Nino and I really relied a lot on a kind of gut response to an artist. And what I think that initial kind of impulse allowed us the flexibility to do is it allowed us to determine that one singer who might be just a magical mess, somebody who needed a complete restructuring and renovation of every single space within its, within the house. And another artist who was incredibly advanced in all the skills, but just needed some kind of help figuring out, the last polishing efforts of repertoire. So it allowed us the flexibility to take both of those people into the same program and then give them opportunities that would eventually result in them both having the career of their dreams, ideally. So Nino and I had a lot of success, I think, with a broad range of artists, from artists who really needed our help, kind of wrapping their head around what these last couple years before they embarked on a major professional career might look like, and other artists who kind of needed to learn how to sing, but what they brought to the table was such magical natural talent that it was worth the investment. So I hope these people don't mind me talking about them, but for example, I immediately think of two tenors, Ben Bliss and Joshua Guerrero, who Ben auditioned for us when he was working in production at the Dr. Phil show. And a friend of mine who's a conductor said, there's this guy that was an undergrad at Chapman, and believe it or not, he's, not a voice major, but I think he can really sing. And he walked in and he just, was so spectacular that I thought, I don't even care if we have to teach him this art form from scratch. It's worth spending a few years with this guy. And Josh Guerrero had been, I think, working at a hotel in Vegas when a coach who was known to LA Opera said the same thing. There's this kid doesn't know what he's doing, but my goodness, that is a voice. And he walked in the room, and I remember, just thinking, I'll do anything I can to get you here, because I just want to hear that natural sound for. And now, of course, they're both on every stage all over the world, and then you take somebody like Anthony Leon that you just mentioned, and we're all talking about all tenors, but there's examples of all of them. And Anthony was much more polished. He was really, he had a really solid vocal technique. He had really masterful kind of artistry and interpretation, but he needed some help meeting the right people, and he needed some help understanding the repertoire that was likely to be his bread and butter for a large amount of time. So all these artists at different levels were able to come into the program at LA and kind of emerge at the early stages of a real career because we retained that flexibility in how we approached everybody.
Well, for those people who have not listened to last week's episode with Anthony, go back and listen and hear Anthony's story of singing in the closet into a sweater so his parents wouldn't hear him. And imitating the three tenors. I asked him, like, where did you get this tone? And he says it's from listening to the three tenors,
I'll tell you also, Anthony's family is incredibly musical. There are parties where they have like a room full of instruments, and it's just like hours long jam sessions.
They're like the Osborne family or the Osmond family. Yeah,
that probably accounts for a little bit of his sophisticated artistry.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that he had family support. He had your support. He had your advocacy. He had, great technique. Everything was set up for him. But I still feel there are people who have all this promise, but somehow fall down. Without naming names, can you talk about some people maybe that didn't go through your programs, but like who you saw that were on your radar, and you said, if they had just had this, I think they could have gone further,
Yeah. I mean, look, I want to say something that the job is a really tough job, because I always say to people, there are a lot of people in this industry who have learned a great deal about opera by osmosis and by experience and having been in it. But I always say, you've either been the person who had to open their mouth in front of a couple thousand people and experience what that was like, or you haven't. And at the end of the day, the people who have had to do that, understand the small subtleties and the difference, and so I will say there have been artists that I had enormous faith in who excited me tremendously when I first heard them, who we just weren't able to get where I thought they could have gotten. And it is because the business has a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on artists. The kind of fear and anxiety that accompanies opening your mouth in front of all those people and delivering consistently. It requires a mindset that is almost kind of Olympian and athletic in nature, because it requires you to be able to repurpose the body's natural fight and flight response to that kind of, you walk out on stage, and even people who love performing, the body does tell you in certain ways, get out of here. You are on a stage alone with 72 players in the orchestra and 3,000 people in the house, and there's a spotlight on your face. Get out of here. This is not safe, And so it's the people who learn to repurpose that fight and flight response. And I'm not saying that that's true, that it's unsafe. It's a very safe place to be if you've trained well. But the body interprets that stimulus, and kind of you have to repurpose it and say, this is good. Thank you, body, for giving me that stressful response. That's going to help me stay focused. That's going to help me remember the things I've practiced in order to get here. It's going to help me remember that the people that I see looking at their cell phones and reading their programs in the front row, don't bother me. It's all okay. The focus, the kind of the weeding out of the audience, like an athlete, the weeding out of the screams, the people heckling you. So to do that requires a mental focus and a kind of psychological preparedness that's very, very difficult. So in my experience, and I'm sure that there are examples of me in which I'm very wrong, but in my experience, the majority of the people who I heard and thought, you're a superstar, let's just try to do this right, when it didn't go right, it was probably more of a mental thing than anything else.
Well, I'm glad you brought up sports, because I understand that you have this sort of sports psychology approach, and that you have created even a course at the Shepherd School about this. Did I get that correct?
Well, almost. It's a real interest for me. What we've been doing is, when I was at Juilliard, I had a renowned psychologist, Don Green, whose specialty went from athletics to performing arts, taught us some courses in exactly what I just articulated about kind of reframing the whole experience so that all of those stressors work in your benefit, and rather than against you. And that really stuck with me, and that's something that I always wanted to bring back. And there are a number of singers actually that I'll say I wish I had their permission to mention them by name, but since I don't, I'll just be vague, that have told me stories about having real challenges, kind of overcoming sudden onset stage fright and some sudden onset technical kind of self-sabotage, and finding great relief. Yes, in the voice studio with teachers, but also in the therapist's room with people who understood what athletes go through. So these are singers who have told me that they worked with sports therapists or peak performance therapists to kind of get their mind right, and it really worked. So that's been a long goal of mine to incorporate that in a regular way at the Shepherd School of Music at Rice. And we've, in working towards that effort, we've been really lucky to bring in therapist Beth Clayton, who was herself a singer, but now specializes in kind of performance. And again, if I'm using words that she wouldn't use, I apologize, but I interpret it as a kind of optimal performance mental preparedness therapy technique in kind of making sure that the singer's mind is right. And so what she does is not unlike what the therapists that work with athletes do, as far as I understand it, like you will have seen on Ted Lasso, for example, most recently. Rice has such a strong athletics department, and there is an entire, as I understand it, team of people who specialize in making sure the athletes are prepared mentally and psychologically in this way. And I would love to work in that direction. But I want to, admit that it's still a work in progress.
Well, you're the second person to have brought up Beth Clayton in terms of this topic, and you can probably guess who the other person was who brought her up. So I definitely have to get Beth on the podcast soon.
Yeah.
Since we're now talking about Rice and the Shepherd School, are there any programs or classes, or maybe just the fact that you're there, that are specific advantages to studying at Rice over, let's say, other very famous institutions which you might know intimately?
Yeah, well, listen, there's so many incredible conservatory and music schools in this country, but one thing I will say that I found very compelling about coming to Rice is that the department is quite boutique, which is like, in real estate, when they say things like that, they mean tiny. But that's what I loved about it, is that, for example, it offers us at Rice the same flexibility that I grew up in arts management. I grew up in a place that really supported my instincts towards flexibility and changing curriculum for every single person coming through the program. And what I love about the department at Rice is that it's small enough that we can similarly take students interested in getting a degree, but who are at very disparate levels. The one thing they all have in common is that they all really excite us with their potential. But that could mean somebody who has no idea what they're doing and just brings this spectacular sound or innate musicianship, musicality to the table. And it could be somebody else who's just worked their tail off and accomplished great skill. And so, because the department is small and because we have 4 full-time opera coaches for only 32 singers, plus me, plus a staff of 3 extraordinary people working in production, plus 3 extraordinary voice teachers. So every student that comes to Rice to study voice, I always tell, when I'm speaking to students in advance of their accepting our offer of admission, I always tell them, if you are somebody who likes to kind of disappear in a crowd and kind of wants to let us know when you're ready to be visible, it may not be the place for you, because with only 30 or 32 singers and a huge faculty like that intentionally, every student is kind of in the spotlight every day. But if that's what you're ready for, I don't know of any other place like that.
Well, as of today, it's okay to talk about the 25-26 operas that are planned for the academic year. Would you like to let our audience in on this embargoed release?
Yes, and I'd like to preface it with just a little context, which is that for those that don't know, we are lucky enough to have a brand new opera house, which I think is, one of the most beautiful opera houses I've ever seen. It's this jewel box theater modeled after the Royal Opera in Versailles. It is created so that it has quite a respectable height, so that everybody in the audience is very close to the stage. In other words, it goes up rather than back, so that everybody in the audience has a very, very strong access to the intimacy of the performance on stage, which means we can do successfully anything from Monteverdi to Wagner, and we've done both. And we have an orchestra pit for 70 something players, which means there's no repertoire off limits. So I say that only to say, one of the things that we've prioritized at Rice is making sure that the repertoire we do provides and mirrors the same kind of comprehensive education we expect them to be getting in the practice room and in the classroom. So if we expect them to study things like German diction and Italian diction and music theory and ear training and acting and all of these things as part of their degree, then we have to provide them opportunities on the stage of this extraordinary opera house that are equally comprehensive. So in the course of everybody's time at Rice, I want them exposed to all of the great repertoire. I want them to have Baroque repertoire, classical era, bel canto, early, I want them to have post bel canto kind of Verdi. I want them to go into Puccini and Wagner, and then of course, contemporary music, which is so important. And so as part of that rotation, we've landed on this year for those students leaving us at the end of this coming year. They will have had a large number of opportunities, but they will have missed some pretty central pillars of the repertoire. So that all led us to choose Mozart's Magic Flute.
A banger. We've heard of it.
We've heard it. And Verdi's Falstaff as the spring show. The Verdi title is very exciting for our spring because it will be the first opera conducted by Miguel Harth-Bedoya, who's the new director of orchestra studies at the Shepherd School Orchestra. So in that way, students who are graduating this coming year will have rounded out their education with major exposure to classical era repertoire, German language repertoire, Verdi, Italian. And that really complements what they all had last year. So that's my way of explaining how we landed on those two big titles.
Two great ensemble operas with plenty of parts, but do you have a 40-year-old baritone to cast as Falstaff? Are you going to sing it?
Well, and to go back to what I was saying about the boutique nature of our size, we cannot choose repertoire until we know who accepts our offer of admissions. Because, if we make an offer of admission to 4 very different tenors and one of them chooses to go to a different school, that might have eliminated that one tenor or that one soprano or one mezzo or one whatever might have eliminated like an entire genre of music. You can imagine the most obvious example would be, if we have a light Mozart tenor and a Spiel tenor and we make an offer to one kind of Verdi Puccini tenor who goes somewhere else, that eliminates like an entire, century and a half of Italian music that we won't do until that student comes the next time.
Then you're doing Marriage of Figaro.
Oh, right. And so we just got really lucky that one of the students who accepted our offer of admission is 100% ready to be singing Falstaff. And without him coming here, we wouldn't have done the title. So that could be seen as a challenge in finding repertoire that we have to wait till we have signed offer of admission from everybody. But I love that. I don't ever want to do a show and then realize we didn't get the right singers for it.
Well, you heard it here first. Shepherd School of Music at Rice University is going to do Magic Flute and Falstaff in their beautiful theater that only goes up and has room for 70 players. Check it out. Learn more at the website, operaboxscore.com. Josh Winograde, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Our thanks to the PR team at Shepherd School of Music for connecting us with Josh Winograde. Ashley, so now that you know that sports psychology would be part of his curriculum, would you like to share maybe with Josh, as he's probably listening to this, what you think could also be added to a singer curriculum?
Would I? First of all, Josh, hello, big fan. Congratulations on all your work. Love your profile. There are so many people that, really beleaguer the point of, we need to stick to the classics and teaching the repertoire. Yes, absolutely. We absolutely need to teach the things that programs often teach: history, theory, performance, practice, and if you're lucky, a little bit of stage time. But let's be honest, that is one corner of what life as a business of singer actually does. So what should also be included in this, I appreciate the sports psychology of it all, but I also think just the business landscape of singing. What does it mean to actually be a singer? Are you going to focus on choral? Are you going to focus on solo? What do you do with an agent? How do you get an agent? They're not teaching us any of that. You know what they're also not teaching? Accounting. contracts, contract law and regulation, how to read an artistic contract, business development, how to establish an LLC, how to establish a nonprofit organization. And since sports psychology is going to be in there, I'm a big proponent of behavioral health. I think we can sort of lean that in there. It's strength and conditioning. And it's, your body is your instrument, but your brain is a part of that body and needs its own conditioning. So I appreciate Joshua paying attention to that. But yes, if you're looking to start a new music school, sir, I have plenty of ideas on how to do that. Hey there, why don't y'all help us spread the word about Opera Box Score by giving us a rating on Apple Podcast or Spotify? And if you have a few extra moments, why not write us a review? Make sure that those stars are higher than 4 and make sure that all of your thoughts about us are absolutely glowing. Please take more than 2 minutes to write that review. Hey, speaking of 2 minutes, let's do the 2-minute drill.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Valery Gergiev will make an appearance at this summer's Un'estate da Re festival in Italy, his first in the West since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The appointment has been met with criticism from Italian politicians, including European Parliament VP Pina Picciarino. It is unacceptable that European funds are being used to finance the performance of a Kremlin supporter. And guess who else had something to say? Peter Gelb! Gelb condemned the performance in an interview with Die Welt, stating that he could not understand why an ally of Ukraine would host Putin's biggest ally, and called the move moral corruption, weakness, and possibly naivete.
As Italy is suffering through the European heat wave, a number of singers have either fainted or needed medical attention during recent performances at the Arena de Verona due to overheating. The singers are wearing helmets and costumes weighing over 20 pounds in the outdoor arena, where even the late start time temperatures are still above 80 degrees. Organizers plan to introduce pulse monitors to keep an eye on the sweltering singers.
After being detained by U.S. immigration in Detroit, Czech clarinetist Jaroslav Skuta has abandoned his U.S. tour. I was subjected to aggressive, demeaning interrogation and threats of jail time, Skuta said. Despite having all the necessary documentation and clear evidence of the cultural and non-commercial nature of our project, I was treated with suspicion and hostility from the very beginning. After 5 hours of interrogation, I was denied entry and forcibly sent back home to Prague. Skuta, who was traveling for concerts with his trio, described his treatment as humiliating and traumatizing.
In our returning segment, WTF at KC Today, another one. Jazz pianist Jason Moran is the latest figure to exit the Kennedy Center, resigning from his position as the center's artistic director of jazz. A 2010 MacArthur Fellow and composer of the critically acclaimed scores of Selma and 13th, Moran said on social media, "I bowed on Juneteenth."
And now for some happy news, Opera Philadelphia's 50th anniversary season will kick off with a gala called Vox Ex Machina, pairing opera with state-of-the-art technology. The concert portion of the evening, featuring performances by premier artists, will also offer a unique synesthetic experience. Each singer's aria will become a physical painting. Using a bespoke machine created at Drexel University's Excite Center, the audience will see sonic visual representations in real time, and then head over to the dinner portion of the event, which we assume will still offer mass-cooked salmon, filet mignon, or pasta for the vegetarians.
What's the buzz? An insane JCS taking place at the Hollywood Bowl starring Cynthia Erivo as Jesus on August 1st through 3rd. Congrats to friend of the show, Zachary James, who's cast as Caiaphas, along with Are You Sitting Down? Along with Philippa Sue, Josh Gad, Adam Lambert, and Raul effing Esparza. I need a cigarette. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh is hiring. The Pittsburgh Opera is seeking its next general director. The position comes with a 6-figure salary and relocation expenses. Hear us out. What do you think about having 4 podcast hosts as your general directors? We know some people.
In major awards news, San Francisco Opera has been awarded a 2025 Opera America commissioning grant for women composers to support The Galloping Cure, an opera by friend of the show, Missy Mazzoli, and friend of the show, Royce Favrick.
Contestants for the 2025 Operalia competition have been announced. Americans competing include tenor Nathan Bowles, mezzo-soprano Natalie Lewis, baritone Ian Rooker, our hometown hero, and contralto Jasmine White. This year's contest takes place in October in Sofia, Bulgaria. May the odds be ever in your favor. In trade news, Wada Prairie Opera Festival has announced that John Savaman will be its new Chief Executive Officer and Artistic Director starting September 1st. British conductor Jonathan Knott has been appointed as the new music director of Grand Théâtre de Liceu beginning in 2026. Composer, organist, conductor, and bass Owen Park has been appointed Chief Conductor of the BBC Singers also in 2026. And in Don't Cry for Me Kennedy Center news, Deborah Rutter has been appointed to a new role as the Vice Provost for the Arts at Duke University.
Crunching the numbers, the Glimmerglass Festival is celebrating a major fundraising milestone in their 50th anniversary year. Donors contributed $6.7 million to the festival's campaign, shattering their original $5 million goal a full 3 months ahead of schedule. With this overwhelming response, organizers have now set their sights higher, announcing a target of $7.5 million.
On the disabled list, Estonian conductor Neeme Järvi slipped on the conductor's podium as he was throwing flowers to the singers after conducting the Estonian National Symphony at the National Song Festival. Järvi injured his cervical vertebrae in the fall, but is optimistic about his recovery. I acted like a young man. I just have to be attentive. It's that balance.
Exit stage right. Polish conductor Władimir Siedlik has passed away at 61. He was one of Poland's most important choirmasters and an award-winning conductor and teacher. From 1995 to 2010, Siedlik served as director of the Polish Radio Choir in Krakow.
And on this day, July 14th, Bastille Day, a few opening performances for you. 1668 brought us the first performance of Antonio Cesti's Il Pomodoro in Vienna. 1682 brought us Antonio Draghi's Il Tempio d'Apollo in Delphi in Luxembourg. 1701 was the first performance of Campra's Artus ou la Vengeance de l'amour in Paris. And in 1948, first performance of Kurt Weill's folk opera Down in the Valley at Indiana University in Bloomington.
Birthdays include baritone Alberto de Bassini, born in Firenze on this date in 1847. In 1850, it was the birth of Austrian-Italian baritone Giuseppe Koschmann, born in Istria. In 1901, English composer Gerald Finzi was born in London. In 1922 was the birth of Turkish-based Gerard Sarkoyan in Istanbul. 1926 saw the birth of French tenor Gustave Bottio in Paris. Welsh soprano Patricia Kern was born this day in 1927. Irish tenor Francis Egerton was born in Limerick in 1930. In 1940 was the birth of Italian tenor Benito Maresca, and happy birthday to Austrian tenor Adolf Dalla Pozza, born this day, July 14th, in also 1940.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Just a little bit of Gustave Bottio singing the aria of Romeo from Romeo and Juliet. I always like hearing these mid-20th century singers. For me, maybe because this was a performance in France, I have no idea where it was, but I assume it was in France. There's a little bit more looseness to the sound. Like it's not as tightly controlled. Maybe that is the creeping in of an international approach towards French music. But I would assume that since this guy is French, he was following some kind of French tradition. So I think what we can learn from it is that we are sometimes too strict with rubato. And even in French music, we can be a little bit more expansive. That's what I hear. That's what I'm going to say when I coach this aria next time.
I like that. I like that attitude. And I think you're right. You know, 50s, 60s, that's when we're really starting to see more of an international exchange of artists. We're also starting to see more recordings being available in different places. So you do start to see a little more cross-pollinative interpretation from different corners of the world.
Yeah, and as a result, it was less concentrated. What word am I looking for?
Diluted,
a diluted national style towards more of an international style. Look at me and the words, you know.
Look at you. Speaking of words, I have a couple of words for this whole story with Gergiev. I wrote down Gergiev is Italy's controversial it girl, and Peter Gelb is Messica Simpson. She keeps getting involved in all of these conversations. My goodness. The whole thing's weird. I mean, you've got all these left-leaning politicians in Italy writing, saying, how could you use EU people, EU money to do this when, they're on the side of Ukraine for the most part in this big argument. I'm not really sure why Peter decided to weigh in, but I like that he's really deciding to get in the middle of all of these different.
He needs something to do.
He is bored, I guess.
His wife is off conducting that Freedom Orchestra, so he's just at home, like looking for.
Oh my god!
He's on the internet, like, poop posting on X, just going
yeah. He's using X as his version of Truth Social. Well, I mean, and there were some politicians that were a little more open-minded, being like, this is an opportunity for us to have a coming together of the minds, an exchange. And I'm like, an exchange of what? I mean, it feels pretty cut and dry. I mean, in the same week where we've got one of the top executives at a Ukrainian arts organization have their home hit by shells, we've got Gergiev getting EU money to come and do his first conducting gig in the West since all this started. So it's yucky, it's icky, it's messy, but Gelb's decision to interject himself into the conversation by an article in Die Welt is just adds to the hair, just adds to the complication. Another complication that's very disconcerting is this clarinetist who decided to give up on his U.S. tour after his little immigration. We'll call it a kerfuffle. That's being kind. It's.
This is how it begins.
It's like, unconscionable.
So he's Czech, and his name is Yaroslav. I mean, he's for all intents and purposes a white man. So that's. But maybe. I don't know what it is about that made them single him out, But anyway, this is how it starts. We hear these stories, and how many stories like this are not being reported? It's just because this guy has a platform on theviolinchannel.com, which is where we're reading this story,
Surprisingly good news and updates are there on the Violin Channel. But
no shade against Violin Channel, but how many artists are going to just stop coming to the U.S. because they don't? We already heard about people, I forget.
Several.
Was it not James Ennis? It was that violinist, Christian Tetzlaff, who is not going to
Tetzlaff
perform.
Is out. I mean, and honestly, like, we deserve it, Like, I'm disappointed. I hate that this is happening, but it's. The more it happens, the more we talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the more we realize just how completely ridiculous all of this is. I am very sad to him and his trio that he was going to be touring with. But it's, you're right. This is how it starts and we deserve it.
Okay, but we have to, I want to analyze a little bit more on the meta scale. Himself and his administration. Oh God, I said his name. Am I in trouble now?
No, you're fine.
Weston, bleep that out so I don't get deported. This administration probably doesn't care about chamber music, but
the odds are.
yeah, but the possibly oligarchs or the elite class that actually fund chamber music festivals and attend performing arts are actually some of Trump's the administration's constituents. So, is there going to be like some pushback when it starts affecting classical music? I don't know. It's hard to say, like what are the pleasures of that class of people? And we know that like music is supposed to be for everybody and like, you don't have to be rich to love clarinet music. But let's be honest, like the people who are supporting those things, are exactly the type of people who are in line to become oligarchs, Well,
who are benefiting from the tax breaks of the most recent sets of legislation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Bezos is buying boats. These other people are supporting chamber music societies. But this is, I mean, again, this is what happens when you've got, and they had this plan all along. They wrote a whole book about it, and some of the things that they outlined were the things that they were going to come after to dismantle. One was our arts foundations and our arts networks. The other was education. We're seeing a lot of both right now. So this whole thing is just a big bummer, and I feel very yucky and icky and sad about it. But I also recognize that, maybe there is going to be a slight, sort of turn of a knob when rich oligarch in training number 2 realizes he can't get his Yaroslav fix of clarinet jams. So mayhaps that will bring our sweet Czech clarinetist friend back. I'm not really sure. What we almost didn't bring back were these poor feigning singers in Verona. My God. One of the quotes that they said in the article where they talked about the different feigning in the heat was, it's like Squid Game.
Well, the article that we're going to link to, you'll see some of the costumes. They look very non-cotton. It's like lots of like plastic and, acetate and like space AG, really cool productions, actually, but
totally,
not exactly the type of costume you want to be wearing, in 90-degree weather with heat index,
Well, and apparently the dude who designed and is directing, he also did this for Nabucco, which is supposed to go on after Aida. As far as we know now, Nabucco's going to be all systems go, but like, I'm not really sure a pulse monitor or a pulse ox is going to help us, with taking out a couple of extra choristers, especially God, those choruses in Nabucco, you're going to need everybody. You can't have a single man down when it comes to that.
So how does this work? So if you're wearing a pulsometer in the middle of the show, you get to like take a knee and just like walk off stage, like if your pulse is too high.
Well, I think if your pulse is too high, or if your pulse ox, like the oxygenation in your blood goes below a certain level, that's like an indication that you're probably on the verge of fainting. So I guess what they're trying to do is sort of combat that and get to these people before they faint. I say maybe give them some breathable gauze, maybe a little bit of linen, as opposed to whatever fabric this gentleman has been using.
Squid Game costumes,
Squid Game costumes. And I'm a baby about the heat anyway. I'm about to do an outdoor concert at Ravinia. I'm doing Mahler 2 for one night, and I'm already like lamenting how horrible it's going to be. I can't even imagine what it's like for these poor Verona singers. Oh yes, by the way, if you're in town, go see Mahler 2 at Ravinia with Chennai Brooker singing and Sasha Cook.
She crushed it. She just sang with Sankara, I don't know his name, Sankara Haruna, I think his name is, the Margaret Bond's Credo, which I'd never heard before, but she sang at Grand Park, and it was a 2-part concert, and intermission came, and then a major thunderstorm swept through Chicago. They had to cancel the second half of the concert. Then I went to Ravinia the next day for opening night of CSO's residency there. And there was a tornado warning the entire time, and it started raining, and heavy winds started coming through during the Rite of Spring, and like people's music was like flying off the stands. It was perfect.
Honestly, my first contract with Ravinia, my first contract with the Chicago Symphony, which happened to be at the Ravinia Festival, almost a decade ago, we the symphony chorus's uniform used to be a white top and black bottoms, and similarly, as we were getting ready to go from where we were being housed in our green room to the outdoor amphitheater, a huge torrential gully washer downpour came out of nowhere and caught all of us outdoors with no protection, and we're all wearing white tops, including the orchestra. And so I called it the world's classiest wet t-shirt contest, because we were just like all white shirted drowned rats. I had like done my makeup real pretty because I was so excited to be singing with CSO, and I just looked like a complete monster when it was over with. But yeah, global warming's not real, right? Hey, let's talk about this Opera Philadelphia thing. This sounds super cool, but you may know a little more about it than me. Can you riff on it for a second?
Well, it's their opening night gala, and we know galas, it's for they're going to sell tickets to the concert part of it, but it's really just like concert and dinner. But the concert part is trying to be special because it's Anthony Roth Costanzo, and it's featuring Stephanie Blythe, Nicole Heaston, Will Liverman, Daniela Mack, and Anthony Roth Costanzo. So most of the people are friends of the show, and I would go hear a concert of them under any circumstance.
Any day.
Yeah, but they have this they're working with this digital, I don't know, call it digital artist, but he's a engineer, I guess is the best way to describe him, who has created some machine that turns sound into visual. Like, it creates a...
Yeah, it's like a take on synesthesia, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, as the press release says, that each singer's aria will become a physical painting in real time, harnessing bold new technology to marry music and art using this machine that they created, I forget what it's called, but it's from the Drexel University Excite Center, and artist and creative technologist Daniel Belcare. So, yeah, it'll be, something to look at the minimum. And it's different,
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's cool. Even if it is, it sounds or feels a little gimmicky, it's because it kind of is. But at the same time, we always love, opera is a multimedia form. It includes the visual. It includes the audio. It includes, in some cases, touch when you're feeling programs and seats and all that good stuff. I actually saw something once that had live singers and live painters. So it takes the ex machina portion out of it, but but there were live painters that were just in real time creating in a reaction to the songs that were being performed, and it was really special.
Interpretive painting, yeah.
Basically, yeah, it was really, really cool.
It's my understanding that there's actually paint on a canvas that is a result of this performance. Using the variables of pitch and volume and vibrato from the singers. So maybe at the end of the performance, they'll sell the paintings, and there's more money for Opera Philadelphia.
I mean, it's not going to be as much as Glimmerglass has been raising, but God, way to brag, Glimmerglass. Can you come do this for everybody else now that you've set this new magical fundraising goal for yourself? I mean, good on you. Congratulations.
I wonder what is about Glimmerglass that they found the money.
They've just they really tapped into it, but we should interview somebody from there and be like, yo, what's your secret? But also do it on the air so it's not so much of a secret. Also, finally, I want to talk one more time about this stacked AF cast that's coming in Jesus Christ Superstar. Holy wow. Good job, Zachary James. Way to get in there as Caiaphas. But my gosh, this cast, Philippa Sue is Mary Magdalene, Raul Esparza, who is my everything. This is... my friend of a friend, Joey Taranto, is going to be in it. I am just so jealous. I'm actually now actively thinking of ways to get to Los Angeles on August the 1st. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's definitely something I would be interested in. Zach, if you have clumps, call me. I'll come. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. How we end every episode. There's just going to be 2 calls this week because there's just 2 of us. Oliver Camacho, we'll start with you.
Well, right after we recorded our episode last week, the New York Times published one of their critics' notebooks on Des Moines Metro Opera. That one written by Zachary Wolf. We will link to it on the webpage for this episode. You can see all the beautiful pictures from this year's productions. And as a reminder, I'm heading out to Des Moines for the first time this weekend to catch Vixen and Rake's Progress. Rake's Progress starring friend of the show, Joelle Harvey. So I'll be back next week with a report on that.
Fantastic. And I would like to congratulate some record-breaking string players over in Germany. The Westfalen Symphony Orchestra arranged 1,353 German musicians of a wide variety of ages to break the world record for the largest string orchestra performance. They played, you guessed it, Ode to Joy. Despite wind and rain, the local musicians and audience members turned out in droves to support the record attempt. They break a record that was previously set in Hong Kong in 2018 that had 1,021 players. When we become the heads of Pittsburgh Opera, we're going to go for breaking this world record once again. Stay tuned. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can get your voice heard and find links to the stuff that we've talked about at our website. Guess what that is? operaboxscore.com. That is also where you can put your money where our mouths are. You can give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is Weston Williams. The executive producer of OBS is George Cedarquist. For our guest, Joshua Winograde, I am Ashley Hardgrave, asking you to continue the the conversation about opera as you carefully throw flowers to the singers. We are back with an all-new show next week when we get a field report from Des Moines Metro Opera. Plus, you'll get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more sassy elephants. Join us.